Hey everyone, I just have some quick thoughts regarding libertarianism, the non-aggression principle, and threat narratives, and to some degree universally preferable behavior.
The lowest common denominator of all of the forms of ethics that are even remotely useful invoke the non-aggression principle and invoke libertarianism. Everybody claims to be libertarian in some language or another. Everybody's claiming to be this live and let live kind of person, right? Like they're minding their own fucking business. Very, very, very few people openly advocate aggression and violence against others that's unprovoked. And anytime people are guilty of that, they'll use a threat narrative in order to justify it. And this was one of the points I made in my Teal Swan video, which is that patriarchy theory, I believe, is the most prominent threat narrative. And the implication of that is that people who believe it then will find situations where they feel justified in aggression where they otherwise wouldn't, because they believe this threat narrative. They can see their target as someone who is a threat, therefore someone who they can retaliate against, someone who they can even preemptively, shut down, because, as it says, it's a threat narrative, right? They feel threatened. So, and that's one thing that I really try to stress over and over again, and I'd like to get some feedback on. It's basically a combination of the non-aggression principle with this idea of the threat narrative. I believe that when people use threat narratives, what they're doing is they're affirming libertarian ethics. And, when two children fight each other and then they say, oh, he started it, no, he started it, that too, the common thread is libertarian ethics. You can see how it applies to that situation. Look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Whichever side you're more sympathetic to, you're probably going to be packaging it in something to say, like, they're the major aggressor. Like, you'll have some reason for drawing the timeline the way you do in order to make your narrative, make the most sense, be the most persuasive. Both sides will do that. And I'm curious to see counterexamples. It seems to me that this is just extremely common and extremely useful. Ever since I articulated it, I have been able to see it more and more and have more examples of it all the time. But yeah, I will say that patriarchy theory is the best example of it. And that I'm very optimistic. I think that a lot of what some people very pessimistically chalk up to nature, I think that some of it is the result of the narratives that we believe in, that we're indoctrinated into. And one thing that I didn't touch on in the video about Teal Swan, I was discussing patriarchy theory's effect on female behavior, and that they see it as justification to initiate violence against their sons. The flip side of it is men also believe in patriarchy theory, and what happens is when they're victimized, they feel like they deserve it, because they identify with the men throughout history who were the tyrants and the abusers. And that way, when female violence and female aggression and fraud is perpetrated against them, part of them feels like they deserve it, or that it's justified, and that they should feel guilty for it. That's the other half of patriarchy theory. Like, it does cut both ways. In one way, it cuts into female behavior and encourages them to act in all of the ways that MGTOW, say is intrinsic to women. Like, insofar as you're going to say that's natural to women, certainly patriarchy theory makes it worse. Now, I want to be very optimistic and say that maybe recognizing this and recognizing its effect could lead to people being more cognizant and then moving away from those behaviors. But, it remains to be seen. We have to see the behavior change and then measure it. That's the only way to move forward. Until then, all we can do is speculate. So you can either be optimistic or pessimistic. I know that the pessimist generally went out in that gamble. But I find the optimism where I can find it, But the other side of it is that it explains where the male victims are hiding, because a lot of them probably just feel like either that nobody will be sympathetic, or they're not even sympathetic to themselves. So so if they can't even convince themselves to see themselves as victims, then how difficult do you think it is to get other people to? So the interesting thing behind that is that what feminists will often argue is they'll say patriarchy hurts men too. What they don't realize is it's not patriarchy that hurts men too, it's patriarchy theory that hurts men too. patriarchy theory turns women into monsters, and it also makes men more vulnerable to the attacks from said monsters. Alright, that's all I have to say for now. That was a little bit of a ramble. You guys have a great rest of your day here, and keep it easy.